All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Best Self Blueprint. As you all know, the mission of this podcast is to bring on people with the knowledge, insights, and experiences as to what it takes to move towards becoming a better version of who you are, whatever that means to you. So today we have the round table of wisdom. We've got back for more Justin Plez. We've got Jordan and Grant from the Jay Kaskian podcast, which I very highly recommend.
I do that too. You're so fucking cool.
So we've got a lot lined up, but I wanted to start with fear. So do you guys mind me diving into what you talked about on your podcast? So this is something that I found really interesting is that you've both done a lot of the teal swan shadow work. You've really identified like what your actual biggest fears are, not just at the conscious but subconscious level. And both of yours were getting to the end of your life knowing that you didn't like push your limits enough, take enough chances. Yeah. And then that feeling of, quoted, being a flop around failure. So like trying and failing all these things but never really getting anything to stick. Both of those, as my self-proclaimed king of remedial jobs a few years ago, like just always trying things that I knew I could succeed at because I didn't want to keep failing at stuff. And I think that inherently is combined with not taking enough actual chances, not pushing yourself. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you said that a while ago. Yeah. Do you guys still feel those are big fears, or have you now taken action to kind of squash the fear behind those statements?
Yeah.
Which mic do you want?
This is good. This is fine.
All right.
This should be all right. I'm kind of in between the two, so hopefully it gets I think the fear is still the same. Like, it's still the same, like, what I don't want to happen, right? I think the difference between at that point in time from the podcast that you watched to now, I think, is the path to not going there, it gets clearer. You know, it's gotten clearer over time. And I think that just comes from a general hunger for wanting to learn, you know, wanting to learn about life, wanting to figure out, like, how does this work? I don't know if you care if I swear or not.
No, go for it.
I'm probably going to. How this shit works, I guess, how life works. A lot of the things that people and issues that people run into that you can learn from, you know.
I think there's a lot of wisdom that comes from just spending time in that space, too, because, I sort of went about it in a different way because a lot of the things I was looking at were very, like, huge scale. Like, if I don't get to these astounding levels, then I'll always regret it. And partly through the teal swan work and other teachers, I've realized that that's not actually what I really want, that even if I had all of that, it doesn't fulfill, you know? And that space doesn't come from attaining, it comes from being at peace with where you are and what you have. And you can have that peace at every single level that you ascend to. It's just a balance of like continuing to push yourself up and not get comfortable, because that comfort's poison, man.
Yeah, and well said, because that is the truth. Like, that's available wherever you're at right now, and somebody out there is hearing that and saying, no way, it's not available where I'm at. But it absolutely is. When you come to peace with where you're at and you accept that, and you stop holding on to this idea that you should be somewhere else right now, there is a peace that comes with stepping into that. It's just you have to be so introspective to be able to notice all those subtle little voices saying that you should be doing more, you should be better. And, you know, there's power in that. It's not about just completely kicking them to the side. It's just not letting that narration dictate your worth, you know?
Yeah, so, and I think a big part of being at peace is surrender. So, one of my good friends who is actually on another episode of this, Carissa, is a very, very well-educated mindfulness meditation expert. And she said this in the perfect word. She said, you need to learn to trust fall into the universe.
Yeah, that's my life.
Yes,
and
that's perfect. I love that.
And I think when you really begin to experience that sense of peace is when you really hit that moment of like, all right, fuck it, and just like lean back and let the flow of the universe take its place, as opposed to trying to almost like swim upstream against the current that is universal flow in your life and your perspective.
And that's a large part of why I felt that like I needed to reach up higher sort of thing, because I looked at other people in my life who can just grind and grind and grind and grind, and I couldn't. And I was like, if I could do that, then I could be that person. But there's also an aspect of I never would want to be like that, because I would lose everything that I am. Like everything good that's come in my life has come when I've been like, and then I just like float a couple feet and I bump into it and I'm like, oh hey, like a trainer that'll give me all of the tools that I've always been searching for. I just fucking floated. I was struggling and I was fighting and I was like, where do I look? I can't find the teacher. And then Jordan just walks in and he's like, hey, I got this guy for a podcast. And it's like, how do you even make that shit up? But that's how all of these things have unfolded from, or at least the greatest things.
Well, and again, man, I think it's a combination of the two. You can't just float endlessly.
No.
When something really awesome floats into your life, knowing when to strategically start swimming will help you get a lot further along that river. You know, but there are times where you just gotta notice all the resistance and chill the fuck out, and just lay there and just reset and recover before you go for that next hard swim. And you know, same like what you said earlier, like there's people out there that grind and grind and grind and grind, and you see how they grind. Like even Elon Musk is a good example, and I really admire this guy for like he has had one of the biggest impacts on this world. But you look at him talk in his podcasts or when he's been on stuff, and he just has this heaviness and a sadness about him. And it's like, it's different paths. Who's to say that's the wrong path? Like, it's what you're measuring up. But again, aligning with what's important to you. And like for me personally, what's important to me is happiness, fulfillment, and balance. Like, I absolutely want to leave a legacy. I want to make a difference. But, you know, I want to enjoy this journey. And I definitely am completely welcoming to discomfort. But if it's a constant grind, like in those times in my life where I've fallen into this just repetitive grind, there is a level of me going within myself and asking myself, like, is this really aligned with where I want to go or where I thought I wanted to go? Because sometimes when you really push hard and you work at it for a while, you end up getting a perspective that shows you like, hey, this thing that you thought was the thing isn't really your thing. And if you get too attached to that idea and you're not willing to let it go, a lot of people burn off huge chunks of their lives only to realize like they made a massive mistake and have a midlife crisis, you know?
Yeah. This is a fun story. When I was 20 years old and I was doing Northern Shaolin all the time, I was in ROTC and going to college and all that jazz. I was talking to my girlfriend at the time, and I was just telling her how much I fucking loved martial arts and like toying with the idea, like, I wonder what it would be like if I was like a kung fu instructor, like went to a temple, did all this stuff. And she's like, if that's gonna make you happy, why are you pursuing all this other stuff? And I'm like, because I wouldn't be big enough. I wouldn't be like grand enough. And I threw it away. And now, approaching 30, like 10 years later, I'm like, damn, I want to teach martial arts. So don't look at anything you are attached to or feel strongly about and just brush it away as like some ego move, you know? Because these small little nuggets, they're buried in for you to discover, but only you can actually discover them.
Yeah, and one thing that I wanted to touch on, I guess based on where the question is when it comes to fear, one thing that I noticed, at least in myself, and I don't know if maybe you guys will be able to relate to it, but there's almost like two narratives that go on in my head at any given time. There is the fear narrative. You know, there's the, like, I don't know if I can do this. Do I deserve to have these things? Or to feel good or to be happy or whatever it is. And then the self-doubt, and then there's, like, the other side of that coin is the belief, you know, like believing, like you said, like sinking in and accepting in the universe. And, like, those two narratives are always parallel to each other. And I think what happens is, as we're going through our life, like, we're constantly fluctuating between those two narratives. And at a certain point in time, you kind of learn that you can take control of it. You can notice, like, hey, I'm in this fear space right now, and you can start to see the signs of it when you're in there, and then you just accept it. You're like, it's okay to be here. It's okay to be in this scared place. That doesn't mean that I'm going the wrong way.
Yeah, so what's fascinating about you bringing this up is when I research people, I get creepy. Like, I go all in. So I was looking at your Facebook posts, and in one of them you talked about the Native American tale of the two wolves.
Yeah.
And I think what you're explaining is exactly that, where in every single person there's the good wolf and the bad wolf, if you will, positive, negative, yin-yang, dark light, whatever you want to describe them as. But no matter what, both wolves will always be there. But regardless of if it's like you're talking about, even if you think about the negative and you say like, no, that's not the case, but you keep giving it that attention, you're feeding that wolf.
Right.
So what you want to do is just not even give it attention. Understand that that's a part of your psyche and your process of thought, but then simply acknowledging it and then just shifting back to like, okay, but this is what I really want to focus on.
Yeah.
And it comes down to, so let me just also caveat, if it looks like I'm crying, it's because my eyes are super dry. We did a sweat lodge ceremony earlier.
really into this.
So like that's, I'm just tearing up. But no, and so like in that sweat lodge, really the moral of the story, everyone had their own experience, but boiling down to it, it was the more we tried to battle those negative emotions and like win that fight, you could just tell people just looked crappy. And then as soon as you just surrendered and acknowledged like, I can do this, you would see like we would start talking and smiling and connecting. And so it's just kind of having that acknowledgement that those things are there without giving them that power.
Yeah, and that's what I found works the best for me, because I mean I've struggled my whole life with like depression issues and anxiety issues, and it's something that's run in my family, especially my mom's side of the family, for as long as I can remember. And the later half of my 20s now, being able to watch myself go through those spaces and recognize I always come out on the other side okay. I always come out on the other side of that fear or like worry okay. And you start to develop these like pathways in your head as soon as you start getting signs. You start getting signs of like, oh no, that thought just popped in. I know where this is going. And it's not like you're trying to stop it in its tracks, but you can, it's almost like you can take little like detours around them, if that makes sense. If that makes sense, where it's like, I know where this goes, it's cool, I'm gonna let it be. Maybe I just gotta feel like shit for tonight. I'll wake up tomorrow and I'll be okay, you know?
Yeah, and that's just it. Like being able to, with age, hopefully comes wisdom, and you can start to like understand yourself at a deeper level and know these cycles and these patterns. Which brings even to that symbol that you were talking about. It's like
Fibonacci sequence,
Fibonacci sequence, and that idea that it's like life is all about cycles, you know, and to think that it's just going to be this constant path and you're never going to revisit that is a joke. Yeah. You know, you're just going to revisit it at a different perspective, hopefully, if you've done the work. And you get another opportunity to navigate that particular challenge with a little more grace than last time, you know? And as you navigate them with more grace, your internal confidence goes up in your ability to handle things, you know, with more grace, instead of feeling like, you know, the sky's going to come falling down and, you know, you're not going to make it through. This story, this narration, that these very disempowering narrations that we have, that we replay in our head when we're not aware, you can hopefully with time and experience get in front of them and start to insert a better narration. Like you just said, just believing that you always come out the other end, having faith that it'll pass, it's a storm, and when it passes, everything will be shiny again, and you'll be able to really enjoy that at a higher level.
Right. I think the last thing that I want to say about that is, I think the most important part to me, or a really, really useful part when you're talking about fear and negative emotion and anything like that, is gratitude to me. Is not just gratitude like, oh, I'm grateful that I have a house and I have food in my fridge and I have clothes. Not that. I mean, like, gratitude for the hard shit. Gratitude for the bad stuff. Because you start to see how important it is, because each of us as individual humans are super flawed. You know, like to think that you know yourself or you know what's going to happen in the world perfectly, it's ridiculous. And a lot of the really hard things that come up in our lives, in our heads, whatever it is, they're usually like it's like a spotlight, right? Those hard things become a spotlight. Be like, hey, you're feeling this type of way. That means you need to look here. You need to look in this direction and figure out what's corrupted, what's wrong in this area. Why am I having these extreme, reactions or problems in these situations? And eventually you start to see like, oh, I'm grateful that hard thing or that hard mental space came to me, because it showed me a piece of myself that I needed to see,
Yeah, so a couple of things with this. The first one is, I think a lot of people, maybe you, they hear like be grateful for the hard stuff, and they think like you're masochistic because you're like, give me the rough stuff. But it's like, no, you're grateful for it because it challenges you. Because when you're stuck in la la land with all these comforts and no challenges, no growth opportunities, you can be grateful and celebrate that, but what are you really learning? And so to have that opportunity to be presented with that challenge, whether physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, financial, whatever, you name it, that's why it's so important to be grateful, because it's giving you that opportunity as long as you take it. Which leads me to the second part, which is, and we talked about this when we had our last podcast, so you can go watch that one.
Go check it out.
No, but we talked about it's so important to have that awareness you're talking about of when that spotlight goes on, do not scurry back into the shadow. Like, face it, acknowledge it, and step the fuck up. I try not to swear on this, but whatever.
We're all adults here. It's okay.
But yeah, so
as a child.
I kind of do. Like I always talk about having like a childlike curiosity and passion without being childish about how you act.
Yeah.
No, I think that's good balance. Sure. And I think, like, again, as I reflect on my path, and especially lately, just really acknowledging how counterintuitive it is to actively seek out discomfort, and to actively avoid comfort where you can. It's very counterintuitive. It goes against everything we crave. But, just purely reading the patterns that I've learned through my own journey, and then looking around and having my eyes open to other people's journey, it's just so obvious that we have to start to actively seek out discomfort in today's world. Like the sweat lodge me and Trevor did today was like such a perfect example of this exact thing. It's a rite of passage in some cultures, and we didn't go deep into the cultural meaning behind it, but needless to say, it's the guy we were with. His name's Tom. He's a shaman.
Shout out Tom.
Shout out to Tom.
He's in his late 70s, and again, he had his own path, but he keeps this practice alive and has a very traditional, ceremonious thing of doing these sweat lodges. And for a long time, I was very resistant to like over the top ceremonies. Like, I had a bad experience with religion when I was younger, so pretty much any time I see people going really over the top with these traditional ceremonies, there's a resistance within me. But I went into this one very open-ended, and it was a beautiful thing. And long story short, I mean, you're sitting in here, and they heat these stones up to thousands of degrees, and then they bring them in, like, I think it's 7 stones at a time. And then you seal this. Basically, it's like a teepee, and you're sealed in there. And he dumps water on, and the steam goes. And it starts off kind of nice, but as you're sitting in there, you're just cooking, and you're just sitting there with that discomfort. And as we sat here, and there's 4 different rounds, each round being 30, 40 minutes, probably.
I lost track.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say how long you're in there for, but it's a long time, and you're hit with all these different physical sensations. One of just sitting on the ground in different positions, so things are aching, and the other just extreme heat to the point of nausea, like flooding in, and it was just so fascinating because it's such a great practice of noticing your mind focusing on the discomfort, and then your ability to come back to just, hey, this is where we're at, and this is a really cool experience. And that discomfort doesn't need to be the theme of this. Like, I don't need to be lost in discomfort. I can choose to put that aside, notice it, acknowledge it, but then stay very present with the energy that I'm feeling. And the craziest insights came through on that. And we both had like some really beautiful breakthroughs.
Yeah.
And the one that really stood out for me was the fact that I was there with Kat, my fiance, and she doesn't take heat very well. She stepped up, she wanted to do this, and she hung in there a whole time, and she's a warrior. But for me, I can sit with discomfort. Mm-hmm. But it was so painful for me to see her uncomfortable. And it's not like she was being a little sissy. She was owning it, but I just am so sensitive to her energy that I could see she was struggling. Yeah. So it was just the big insight that came to me through all this is I am a savior. My identity is wrapped around saving people. But the reason why I was in that sweat lodge was to test my limits, the same reason she was in that sweat lodge. Mm-hmm. So the fact that I really was trying to find a way to save her was doing her an injustice. If I was to really take it to the full force and try to save her and like even potentially get her to go out, I'm stunting her growth. And even though that was very clear and apparent in there, suddenly this big epiphany opened up to every person in my life where it's not about making it easier for those people you love. Mm-hmm. It's about supporting them through their journey and through their struggle. If you start to take away the pain, they get stunted. Mm-hmm. And they're not able to actually get the juice of the lesson that's in front of them. And that was like this incredible light bulb moment that shined on. And I just wanted to share that. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's a good one. That's a really good one. Like I feel that. Again, I felt that. That's definitely a light bulb moment, right?
Dude,
there. That's good.
It's a serious nugget.
And again, I'm still jury's out on ceremoniously like. How much do I really believe in like the sanctity of the fact that these ceremonies have inherent powers, if you will? Mm-hmm. This led me in the direction of yes, they frickin' do, because it was very evident. I mean, everyone in there was what I call in the pain cave. Like everyone, each round, it was like a beautifully written piece of music where it just kind of like took you on this journey. Yeah. But don't get me wrong, there was a crescendo. There was definite crescendo. And so it was like with each round there were these lulls and these amplifications of the intensity of what you were going through. Mm-hmm. But it seemed like the second half was just a whole different ball game. Yeah. And in how it was set up and the different gratitude practices and intention setting practices we were doing, and we were chanting and singing songs, and then you would sit in silence and just have to be with this discomfort. And it was cool to see the camaraderie of like everyone's going through the same thing physically, but spiritually and emotionally everyone was in their own little realm. And I don't know if you felt this, but I felt like it was almost you were very lightly tapping like an egg. And then all of a sudden that fourth round, it just like a sledgehammer came out of nowhere and cracked it. And I'm not someone who typically like breaks down often at all, even though it might look like I'm crying right now. Like I really don't. Yeah. And there was a part where we all were just going around and saying like, I love you, and then your name. So I would say like, I love you, Trevor Kaske. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I said that, it just like opened up. So in terms of chakras, I would say like throat chakra, like it was just something I hadn't genuinely said to myself with that much sincerity and intention and just like presence. And I just started crying, and I opened up and I told them, I'm like, I just feel the need to tell you guys, like consciously, never even thought of that. Didn't think I had that problem. Didn't see that as a shortcoming in my life. But because of that setting and because we kept just getting pushed mentally, something within me was like, I just needed that so much more than I thought. And so I think everyone kind of had a different breakthrough But by the time you left out of there, it felt like you were almost reborn in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just a really...
That's what's super interesting about like what you were talking about like the actual like almost like ritual type of not ritual or what's the
ceremonial
word? Ceremonial aspect of things like that. That especially when you're going through when the ceremony is something that's hard, it's like you can almost extrapolate that. Those ceremonies are like a distillation of real life. It's like instead of you're taking the same level of I guess discomfort that happens over a time period, in your life, like hard things happen to you. I mean, we're human, we're limited, one day we're all gonna die, that's gonna happen. Like darkness and hard things are a part of our existence. And when you're talking about ceremonies like that, it's almost like you're distilling it into a small experience so you can it's easily digested. Because you can see, I came in here, I came out here, here was the difference, right? Like in life, it's going to happen a little bit more, a little differently. You're not going to hit those instant moments where it's like 3 hours in, 3 hours out, I'm done. But those ceremonies are like a distillation of what happens to you in real life.
Oh, it was crazy. It was almost like the way I think about it, like how people talk about and explain wormholes, where it's like if you draw a line across the paper and then fold it and all of a sudden it's like one point. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what it felt like. Where like what you're talking about, you set an intention going in, and again, that's your conscious mind trying to say like, oh, I need to make more money this week, or like something like that. Then you come out like, I needed more love from my aunt on my mom's side. And like it just has a way of, like you're talking about, just extrapolating the data that you didn't even know think about.
That you needed, right? That maybe it would have taken you 5 more years to figure that out.
So here's a thought. So I'm of the belief that we actually have endogenous, is that the word?
Indigenous?
I think endogenous systems within us that release chemicals that are, if not similar, wildly close to psychedelics. All different types of psychedelics. So one of the huge ones that we have is DMT, and those really, 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 really hard things release in your body micro amounts of your natural ability to make psychedelic chemicals. So that experience you had is very similar to going through something like a crazy super dose of something where you go in there and you're like, I want growth. And you come out like 9 hours later and you're like, I just want to be a baby again. And it's like, I didn't have that in me, but it's the same sort of process. So since we have that in our systems, do you think that's, how do I want to phrase this? Do you think psychedelics are a part of the journey for growing into the best version of humans? Do you think everything that we need is made within us? Since we have options of both.
I think both. I think they're a tool, and I think a lot of the greatest minds out there have used them at some point, but not all of them. Yeah. Like, are you familiar with Ram Dass?
I am.
His guru. He had that story that he shared. Like Ram Dass at the time was a spiritual teacher. For those who don't know, back in the 70s and just the whole spiritual movement back then, and he was heavy into LSD and psychedelics and mushrooms and all that. And he brought a bunch with him to India as he found his guru. And when he found this guru, this guy could see that Ram Dass was attached to these as the vehicle to obtain that spiritual height. And just his guru actually asked Ram Dass if he could have some, and he took an obnoxious amount, like enough where it was scary, and like Ram Dass was worried he was going to die with how much he took. And it had like no effect on the guy. And I think it's safe to say, they didn't say it directly, but I don't think Ram Dass's guru used psychedelics to get to that point. Maybe he did, but I think it's possible to go through life and like experience these things just through the natural act of living. But I do think, without having much experience myself, there's an incredible power behind these tools.
Scary if you're using one of the vehicles to get there. It's terrifying ride. Jordan's had a worse experience than me. But if you're doing the other version, it's horrible in a different way because you spend 3 or 4 hours in a sweat lodge and I'm a baby. I don't know.
Yeah, so as someone on the other end of the spectrum who has had their fair share of experiences with these said psychedelics.
A cultured
Very cultured. Don't do drugs, kids. But no, and first and foremost, I do think there are responsible and irresponsible ways to use these things.
Absolutely.
If you're taking it to go out and party with frat boys and drink and, get with girls, like, is it really necessary to be psychedelically extra tuned?
I think that's when you get the most fuck-ups, too. That's when people go and they have, like, psychotic breaks and stuff. When you're using what I sort of think of as a divine tool to just do human shit.
Yeah.
Like, when you use it in a ceremony, it's supposed to be hard. It's not like a fun thing. But we've done it in the fun way before.
Yeah.
And while it didn't necessarily have bad effects, we weren't using it in like crazy ways. We were more so just using it and hanging out and seeing what would happen. But I can't imagine like someone using it and going out to like a festival or something.
People
like
do it
that.
all the time, dude.
It blows my mind.
That's wild.
But yeah, so I guess to go back to like whether I think it's necessary or not, I don't. I think it's, and I'm not a gamer, so for any of you gamers, I apologize if this is just not even accurate, but I am a Pokemoner, if that counts. And so I think about like the Pokemon mod games. Like, to me, using psychedelics is like playing with some type of mod on there where like makes certain like spiritual connections a little easier. It makes being able to view in a different perspective a little easier. But at the end of the day, you don't need it. Like, whether it's breath work, whether it's certain meditations, whether it's spending however long in a sweat lodge until the point where you look like you're crying all day. Like, like you're talking about, I think there are different benefits to different situations with or without these psychedelic medicines. But I do think a big part of it, if you do decide to use this stuff, is setting that intention of like, I'm using this to learn this new perspective, and then I'm not going to abuse it. And I think that was something, I toyed the line with that, but I ended up getting to the point where like all of these different things I had used, I used so that I could experience what it's like to be in that state.
Yeah.
And so now it makes it that much easier for me to open up my mind and to have newer perspectives.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful for that. But in hindsight, I actually don't think it was absolutely necessary to do that. I think it was just a mod that I put in.
Right, exactly.
Put in the old
it's
system.
a tool. It's like a tool. It's like you can do it the old-fashioned way, but I mean, every once in a while, there's, use a wrench, and it makes it a little bit easier for you to get to that place. And when you don't need it anymore, you don't need it anymore. And that's that.
Yeah, and that's just it. It's teaching everyone their own path, man. It definitely seems to be a strong correlation, though, with some of the most insightful and deepest minds I've listened to and met. Most of them speak that they've done psychedelics at some point in time.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
There's now enough. I mean, me and Kat just watched this documentary called "Fantastic Fungi" or something like that. And that was really, again, that was it's so crazy. It's such an interesting thing, and like even the theories that our evolution is a result of how our brains evolved is a result of our prehistoric like ancestors.
Oh, you don't want to get me started on that track. I will take over your podcast.
Heck yeah, that's why you're here, man.
Right.
I mean, it's interesting. It was an interesting perspective. Few people probably ever heard about, but go ahead, take it over. Let's hear it.
Okay, psychedelics are actually at the root of every single spiritual experience in human history. You think of the wine throughout Christianity, that shit was spiked. They actually have the exact chemical compound broken down historically from the cups that were used for ceremony. They were spiking drink for celebrated spiritual things. They were doing hard shit, like similar versions of sweat lodges, but different. I would have to get specific on each culture. But every single culture, if you find spirituality as like the center point of their civilization, it was drugs. The burning bush, They have some serious evidence to support that the exact bush that was burning was actually one that was releasing an excessive amount of DMT. And that, I'm not saying that was a made-up experience either. I'm saying that person who experienced that had a warp in their connection that allowed them to touch something that was greater than them, because I believe consciousness is the next evolution for humanity, and having your consciousness go up to a higher plane where beings that you can't comprehend in your normal brain discuss to you and give you downloads, and then you come back and you feel just perfectly at peace like you've never felt before. That's a higher consciousness being fucking with you in some capacity.
Yeah, and I think every time we reach another plane, there's some reprogramming that happens within our brain, and usually it takes a very dramatic experience to cause enough of a shift to actually start to reprogram the way you perceive stuff. And using chemicals and stuff is definitely a proven way in some, depending on the chemicals, to do that. But I think within that too, that's where some of these practices come from, because something
definitely.
like the Sweat Lodge, where you're getting to this breaking point of just incredible discomfort, but it's controlled, and you're able to like notice that and bring it back. It's a practice. It's like flexing your bicep, and to be able to like sit at the precipice of ridiculous discomfort and then still be able to just accept that is a mental muscle. And if you can cultivate that, I think a lot of these higher realms become available, because most of the thing that keeps us from there is a resistance to the pains and discomforts we're feeling, whether that be emotionally, physically, or mentally, So I think, at least where I'm at in my journey right now, I see incredible power in just that. Like, I guess that's where I'm at right now, is this incredible filter on noticing resistance and putting it down, noticing resistance and putting it down, noticing resistance and putting it down, and getting really much better than ever before at noticing that and be able to come back to a center point.
Yeah, I think that's probably what you just said is probably the most important thing when it comes to discomfort and learning from discomfort, is choosing it,
embracing it, driving into it,
and right, because the thing is, there's gonna come a point in time where you don't choose it. Like in everybody's life, there's gonna come a point in time where shit's gonna knock you over, man. It's gonna knock you over, and if you can spend the time preparing yourself, and
for when you get knocked over, to be like, oh yeah, instead of being like, oh no.
Yeah, and the thing is, some things nothing will ever prepare you for, but as much as you work the muscle and choose discomfort, it makes coming into those points in your life much smoother, much
Very
smoother.
true.
It makes you be able to figure it out a lot easier,
And allows you to enjoy every part of it.
Well,
for the most part.
enjoy.
Enjoy is a funny word.
I would say enjoying it like a twisted way. Yeah, that's where it does get a little masochistic, because
again, we're trying to put words to this idea, and enjoy is a strong word, because like I said, like we were just talking about, and I told you guys before, I mean, there's some things you can't prepare for, and I was on my one wheel yesterday, and I got very good at riding my one wheel, and I was doing about 18 miles, and my one wheel is like a motorized single-wheeled electric skateboard.
it's fucking cool.
It's pretty cool, except now I can't trust it anymore, because I was just loving life, incredibly present, enjoying the moment, and it just at like 18 miles per hour, it just decided to nosedive and launch me off into a full run and roll and scrape myself up. And, that right there, the practice of, wow, this just happened. And as I get and I ended up on my feet, but I mean, the adrenaline was pumping, but I could tell there was things not right. Like my fingers kind of, I don't think I broke it, but it's like twice the size it should be. And my wrist is jammed up, and my shoulder's scraped up, and my heel is bruised up. And, where I immediately looked around first to see if anybody saw it. Nobody did. Unfortunately, I was hoping somebody would have saw that.
So I could be like, shit.
And then without hesitation, just got right back on it and just started back towards the house. And wasn't terribly attached to, I can't believe that happened. That shouldn't have happened. It was, well, that happened. I'm glad that nothing's too broken.
Well, here, as you were saying that, hearing it for the second time, I was like, all right, well, if I was the omnipotent universe, I think I think if I saw someone who trained their body as hard as you do, that trains their mind to find good in every moment as hard as you do, I think I'd fuck with them. I think I'd give them like a really shitty test, like one that only they, at their optimum moment present, would be able to handle. I know, 18 miles an hour, I'm just going to stop their wheel. I'm going to chuck them. And look at him. He picked it up. He managed to minimize all the pain. He went for the roll. He sacrificed the parts he needed to. Then he got up. And he was like, oh, alrighty then. And I'd be sitting back, I'd be like, yeah, good job, you passed my shitty little test.
Well, that's
onward.
That's the greatest thing, because that was exactly as I'm riding back, like I told you guys, as I'm riding back, I'm just thinking to myself, did I pass? You know, because and then, you know,
think
the
of the
test,
million ways you could have died in
that's
that.
just it. That's just it.
There was
And,
no one around.
and there was perspective. There wasn't this, oh, I can't, like, that shouldn't have happened. There was, again, at the core of it, a very quick transition from, I can't believe that happened, to that happened, and I'm glad it wasn't worse. And that was like a very short, like, and that's where, like, I know that's where the work comes in. You know, all the work and all the things and all the struggles that we all go through, that is the lesson that I think it's trying to take us towards. And it's just like your willingness to just like see that. And you can do that, like, again, man, that is your peace. That's where the suffering ceases. You know, yeah, I'm in pain, but my day was not ruined by any means. Even though after I got home, I look at my phone and I just got fixed and the screen's all shattered. There was another test. It wasn't like, oh, my day sucks. I had to get to work, and I had the longest day on the books that I have had in a long time. Straight, like,
I would say that's definitely part of a test.
oh, it was, and it was so apparent that it was like, I think it made it easier to be that. I think it, because it was so obviously like ironic, it was easy to step into that and see it as that. And I think, you know, as I reflect, and I'm sure a lot of you guys, like, sometimes bad shit happens at such a rate that you almost get to a point, and hopefully a lot of people can relate to this, it gets comical. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, really? Like, that's like, and this
familiar.
is, yeah. And I think it's a universal experience. I think everybody can relate to that. Like, it's so like ironic how much shitty stuff can happen in a short period of time that you just have to sit back and say, all right, joke's on me, whatever. Like, it can't get much worse than this.
Yeah.
You know, and. Sure. There's deep lessons. That's where all the lessons come from. That's where you really find out who you are and what you're made of, you know, in those moments. And if you can pass those tests, you forever leveled up. You will forever be stronger and more durable and resilient. And
prior.
Yeah, and even more ironic, I was listening to an audiobook as I was cruising, and the audiobook was called Anti-Fragile.
Dude, it's so weird you just said that, because I was just going to say my last comment on this. I do time check real quick just to make sure
we made it through like one question.
Okay, all right, perfect.
We're
so
going to have to get you in the lodge, and we'll
that's
do
all right.
that.
It's more of a conversational podcast. This is just, you know, for
it's good to have backups. Sometimes
exactly
you do that.
contingencies.
You're better prepared than us.
But dude, it's so weird you said that, because this goes back to what, do you guys know Tom Bilyeu?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Love
So
that guy.
his idea of creating an anti-fragile identity, his is the learner. I just consider mine like growth. So like when it comes to being someone who's very intentional about learning from these experiences, you almost hit this anti-fragility around it, because when life is like, oh, all right, this will get him, and it's this like crazy test, now you're like, oh, this is an even better opportunity to learn and grow.
Right.
And so, like, don't get me wrong, emotionally and like natural reaction speaking, you're still gonna have those reactions that are like, man, come on, dude, like, why you gotta do me like that? But at the same rate, you're always going back to, like, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this?
Yes.
And the more you feel you just got bent over and spanked by the universe, the bigger a lesson there is in that.
Right.
Which this actually, here, go for it.
You can go ahead. It might tie into whatever you got.
So this was a question I had for you guys. What is one or, you know, multiple of the best takeaways you've gotten from the worst experiences you've had?
That's a good question. Those are like super fresh for me. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I at least for me, I think it ties into what we were just talking about. I think The best way that I can describe it is because we don't have to go into anything. I had a whole bunch of crazy ass shit happen to me over the past year. But I've been really into like spiritual, personal growth, navigating emotional stuff for, I don't know, since probably I was like 23, 22, 23. I started kind of dabbling into it, and I'm 29 now. So, and I had hit a point in my life where I felt like I had some shit conquered, you know, where I was like, I had spent a long period of time with an ex-girlfriend. We were actually in an open relationship. So,
Ooh.
yeah, we went through an open relationship, and that was a bit of a spiritual journey in itself because it was attacking directly jealousy, envy, you know, so many of the really deep, like, difficult parts.
It feels like a knife's in your ego's back, and it just lives there.
Like when you're saying,
like, leave it alone. When you're like, this is fine.
when you're saying like choosing struggle, at least I know me and my ex-girlfriend Sarah at the time, we kind of chose that path. Like, we're gonna throw ourselves into the fire, and we're gonna tackle jealousy. We're gonna see what happens with it. And we spent 4 years doing that, and the amount of shit that I learned about myself emotionally was insane. And so I thought I had a pretty good handle on that stuff, you know, on like on jealousy and envy and a lot of the emotional stuff that comes up with relationships. And this past year for me, I think, I'm not going to go into specifics into what happened just because it's a whole can of worms. But I think one thing that I really took from probably the hardest year of my life was don't be cocky. Don't be cocky. Because if you, like, you think in this comfy place, like, oh, I have a little bit of discomfort here and there, right? Like, there's something can always come around that will put you in your place very quickly. Very, very quickly. And I thought that I was smart. I thought that I had a handle on my emotions. I thought that I was like I got this. I'm cool. Like I can be chill with anything that happens in my life. And with all the things that happened to me, I watched myself for a significant period of time.
Bitch went crazy.
I went crazy, dude. It was.
I love him the most in the world, so I can say it. But bitch went crazy.
It was a really hard time. It was a really hard time, and it was a wake up call for me. I think to not take like your own mortality or fallibility for granted, and understand that that hard shit is kind of a part of the universe, and the further and further along we get and the more we grow, there's always going to be another layer.
Dude,
there's always going to be another layer to unpeel. As soon as you be like, I got that shit.
Right.
Look at this, the last layer has been undone, and then something is going to come along and it's going to stab right through that. And it will show you.
It's the way of the universe.
And it will show you.
And I'd actually add to that and say a big part of why it's so much more painful is because your identity got wrapped up that you got to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because that is like a theme, you know, when even and again, we only got a set amount of time, but just in recent point, like in the last couple months for me, my identity has been as a coach, as a life coach, as a spiritual coach, like, I'm the one with the answers, and my life has been balanced in this really wonderful way where I feel like I got it. And even though I wasn't saying it outwardly and I still remain very humble, I know within myself I had got to a point, especially with relationships, where I'm like, I got to figure it out. I got this wonderful relationship and everything's going smooth, and you know, we ended up having a storm that completely came out of left field. I was unaware of it, and it ended up... It in itself would not have been a big deal, but because I was so attached to this identity that I know it and I got it, it had a delayed fuse of my identity somewhat crumbling a little bit for a short period of time until I was able to come back to just say, hey, I have so much more to learn, and this was such a gift to like give me that perspective back. Because as you go too long with comfort, you get this illusion that you do got it figured out because you were able to create that. And then, when you get this sudden impact of like jarring like discomfort and a reality check, you have two things. You can just pity party it, or you can just come back to the fact that, man, like, all right, that was a gift, and it showed me where I'm weak still.
Now it's time for me to start pulling that layer I didn't know existed.
I think at the end of the day, it comes down to getting tricked into thinking you've arrived at a destination that doesn't exist.
Yes.
There's no destination. And I think, when you fall into that destination mentality, it gets frustrating. But once you just throw that idea out the window, like, I'm never going to know it all.
Yeah.
It's almost the most freeing feeling in the world, because now you can just enjoy the process.
Right. That's exactly it. It's about the process, because this is something a lot of the like spiritual and whatever teachers that I follow talk about. I know Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot. Is we don't know like what like ultimate enlightenment looks like. Like what, like being the perfect person, being on top of all of your emotions, being on top of all of these things. Like, I don't think it's ever existed. Like, there's always going to be this level of humanity that we have, and we're constantly going to be growing and figure things out. So it's not a destination. It's not. It's just a process that's going to end that's going to last until the day you die. And as soon as you can accept that, like, that's the best place you can be.
And that's what I love about it. And we're not going to like really dive into this, because I feel like this is a whole like podcast episode in and of itself. But I think at the end of the day, that's where it does come down to like your personal beliefs in terms of spirituality. Like, do you believe this is a test? Do you believe that after this is that total enlightenment of heaven, or total lack thereof of hell?
Yeah.
Do you just believe that this means absolutely nothing and you're gonna be done when you're done? I think there's just so many routes to take that. But yeah, if you can have fun with the fact that it is just a straight up process with no destination, that you can take any direction or to any intensity that you want, it becomes the most fun infinite game ever.
Absolutely for sure. I don't know, do we have time for anything else?
So we're gonna dive through one more thing quick time check.
Time check. It is. We have.
We'll squeeze it in. All right. So this is something that I'm really curious about with each of you, because you've done the Teal Swan work. I did I found a YouTube video and did the whole 7-minute thing. I didn't actually do it.
The actual the intensive version of that with like one of her trained people.
It's revolutionary.
Yeah.
Holy shit! We both just started sobbing.
So I'm gonna give you the minute-long spiel of what I figured out, and it was the whole like just continue like state a problem that you have commonly throughout the day, or like in a given day, and then with each of the problems, and you lovely listeners at home should try this, because it actually was pretty mind-boggling when I saw this. It says, if that problem is occurring, why would that be bad? And then what would that mean? So like the first thing that came to my mind, because I followed it just step by step without looking ahead, because no one likes a cheater. I said the problem I have every day is not doing everything I know I need to do to set myself up to live the life I want. If I'm not doing everything I want to do, blah, 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 why would that be bad? Because it means I'll either be stuck where I am or regress. If I stay stuck where I am or regress, that would be bad because I'm not satisfied with where my life is right now, and that means I'd be forever unfulfilled. And if I'm forever unfulfilled and unsatisfied, that would be bad because it means I wasted the time God gave me in this life, and I'll be in a fearful state upon death because I let God down and failed my test in this world. And like that hit me, and I was just like, oh my God. I did the YouTube version of this, and it was crazy. So you're supposed to combine so if in a given day I don't do everything I know I need to, that means subconsciously I'll be in a fearful state upon death because I let God down and failed my test.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing you guys ran through a much more elaborate version of that.
And because that's I know the specific video you're talking about.
Yeah,
I've gone through that one.
Yeah, it's useful.
Yeah, that's one that there's so many different routes that she takes.
Yeah, Teal's great for filling out.
And that one is really good. And another version of that can be, I think, when I went through that specific practice, it was if I don't get X or Y done, or I don't have whatever, the reason that it's bad ultimately, like after going through that process, ends up being like I don't deserve love.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's like if I'm not this version of myself all of the time, or I don't accomplish these things that I want in this specific way, or have these specific things, I don't deserve to be loved, and that means I'll be alone.
Yeah,
like it distills itself down to that, and that can be filtered through almost all of our issues. The person cutting you off in traffic, or it can come to being late to whatever,
not getting your laundry done.
right. It can
It's
come
crazy.
all the way. It doesn't matter where. You can start there and extrapolate all the way down to all the things that are painful. Come down to these very specific truths.
Yeah,
and it's going to be different for each person. It's going to be different for each person, which is really interesting.
And that was like, it's crazy how accurate that is. Like it's one of those things where it's like, if you go to a hypnotist and you don't believe in being hypnotized, like, and then all of a sudden you see yourself like running around in your underwear, like hugging a wall because they told you to do it. Yeah. That's that level of this. Where I'm like, there's no way this YouTube video is actually gonna like nail it on the head.
Yeah.
I looked at it, I'm like, oh my god, they know me better than I know myself in a 7-minute video. But so, Mr. Kaskian, what would you say was the most surprising truth that was uncovered for you doing this Teal Swan work?
Well, I have to go into that session I was telling you about by one of Teal's trained people. Do a meditation, then you close your eyes in a separated room, and they walk you through something over like Skype or the phone or something. To shorten it up, I didn't realize that there was fragmented parts of me that were so damaged that there was even a child version of myself that was dead from just like my life. And I'm like, what?
Wow.
My life was great. Like, I mean, my parents divorced. I had like some trouble here and there, but I had a great upbringing. My mom was so about me. She took such good care of me. I had cousins. I met this guy when I was 11. Like, I had a great life. But when I really dug into it, there was so much hurt, so much pain that you don't outgrow. It grows with you in this empty space as you expand, so then you just have this hollow line through you, and it strikes a chord every time you get hit in the world, and it's like, why did that hurt so much more than it should? It's because you never fucking got the chance to heal when you were a child.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was like just some fucking lady we found in like 2012 that just started adding tools to my toolbox of how to develop stuff, and I was going through a really hard time, and I went through the meditation, and I guess the truth was that I think we all do have fragmentations of ourselves within ourselves that we fragmented in order to not self-destruct. We had to separate them so that we could keep going, but they stopped. They're trapped there. And if you don't go back with your consciousness and you don't try to help that part of you that's trapped, it just stays there forever and it never heals. And you don't get a chance to heal it unless you go and you talk to that person.
And it's gonna constantly be pulling strings in the background.
Yeah.
And I'm still dealing with it.
Continues
It's
to like
not like
set
I
off triggers too. That you're like, why the heck is this happening?
Very much so. Suddenly you're just irrational in the world, and you're like, what's wrong with me? It's like, well, if I had a dead 6-year-old living in me, I'd be upset.
Yeah.
There's so much of what you said though that gave me like goosebumps. Just the way you worded it too, man, was just like, it was like poetry.
Prime.
Good.
And it is.
I do have authors in the family, so.
So the reason I probe about that, and we'll wrap it up here because I got a client waiting for me, but I think people don't quite understand why they get triggered. Like, if you get cut off in traffic, obviously, yes, no one really enjoys getting cut off in traffic, but like there are underlying subconscious reasons why you're getting triggered.
Deep.
And very deep. And if you don't figure out what those are, not only is it going to stay the same, it's going to keep getting worse because it's going to keep getting more aggravated that the problem's not getting solved.
Yeah.
So if, there's one piece of advice I can give anyone listening other than pay attention to what we talk about on here, because there's usually more than one piece of advice, it is to, like, whether it's watching a 7-minute YouTube video or it's investing in a coach, do some type of work to identify what's causing those problems. So we will wrap it up there just because of necessity, but anyone listening, definitely go check out the Jay and Kaskian podcast. These guys are very, very well spoken. They articulate their points very well. You can tell that they've experienced what they're talking about. They're not just talking about it for entertainment's sake. They're talking about it because they're invested in letting people know so that they can save you from the mess. They can get you right to the message and avoid, that journey that they had to go through. So I want to thank you guys for being vulnerable like that, not just on here in the last hour or so, but like, 30-some episodes that you've laid it out for people and let them see. One or two.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing to have that level of vulnerability with people who you might not even know the people watching your show, but to be able to lay it out there for them and just say like, hey, I'm passionate about this. This is my viewpoint on it. Take it how you want it. But like to have that incentive and have that go-getter mentality to let people know and to become aware of that, I respect that so much.
Yeah,
me too.
It feels good to do, but it also feels like the right thing to do. Because it's like I understand how limited we are as humans, and it's like, why would you listen to two random dudes that you don't know what our background is, whatever. But the whole point is like we just want to be authentic with what our experience is. We can be wrong sometimes. We can be super right sometimes. And all of it is good and all of it is fair game. I'm just here trying to, just speak from experience, and if other people can relate, that's like an A+ for me. And I really appreciate you asking us to come on, dude. It's friggin' awesome.
Thank you.
And anytime.
We will absolutely be doing a round 2 when I don't press us for time.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious because it's my show. But like, I'm just like, we got to get out of here.
Yeah. No, it's good though, dude. I appreciate it. So.
And just that, like, I think there's not a lot of people who are blessed with individuals in their life where they can go this deep, and have these conversations. So just even being able, selfishly, even beyond the podcast, just being able to sit here and go deep and have these really like interesting conversations where I feel like we can all, as we walk out that door, we took something from it. It's really beautiful, and I hope you listeners at home really, really appreciated and enjoyed that. So.
Absolutely.
That's very true. I'm glad I know you guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
feelings mutual.
For sure.
And as for the listeners, so a couple things. One, if you like mine and Justin's amazing shirts, this is Best Self merchandise available at the Best Self store. Find it in the comments. Haha! But seriously, on a more serious note, like, as I'll say every single episode, anyone listening, especially someone who gets to this point, I cannot give you enough respect for investing the time and putting the effort in to really move yourself forward. Again, we don't know what your life is like right now. We don't know how we can help necessarily, but to be able to keep putting pieces into your life puzzle and do whatever we can to help you, I'm hoping that it's paying off. If there's something that really resonated with you, put it in the comments. If there's someone you know that our conversation will help, there's a reason there's a share button. That's it. Use it. And if you liked what you heard, just hit the like button. Other than that, thank you everybody for listening, and we will catch you next week.
Fantastic.
Boom.
See you guys.